Chinese Grand Prix has concluded and wrapped up, and while most of us have moved on from the event, we have all been gripped back in thanks to a certain journalist post. Sergio Rodriguez, who may as well be the F1 Fabrizio Romano, sent out this tweet following the Chinese race, and OMG, it's saying that Liam will be out after just 2 races and replaced by Colapinto, with Yuki heading to Red Bull. However, just today, it's been said that Alpine have denied Colapinto's move, so Liam is going back to RB and Yuki to Red Bull, according to these new reports. Are you kidding me? Look, I am certainly not Liam's biggest fan. In fact, I'm probably his biggest hater. But come on, dude. If this really happens, which I'm sure it will, 2 races, bro? That is an extremely new low for Red Bull, and it only makes me wonder all the internal fighting within the team. However, that's a different video. This video will be discussing not how Yuki would do in the Red Bull, since there truthfully won't be a definitive answer anywhere, but instead, the history of Red Bull doing this to their drivers. Then you can make your own conclusions on if Yuki will fail or not. By the way, if you're confused on what I mean by Red Bull doing this to their drivers, I mean Red Bull firing every driver not named Max Verstappen due to them struggling in the car. Because make no mistake, this is happening way too often for it to be a simple coincidence. No, there is something going on, so I took it upon myself to discuss this and see what it really is, and maybe see what Red Bull can do so all this driver nonsense can stop. So with that, join the Discord for more chats and subscribe if you're new if you hope Yuki will do good at Red Bull. So enough yapping, and here is the history of this horrible saga. This saga has been going on since 2018, so let's see the first driver Red Bull sacrificed, that being Daniel Ricciardo. Now, this isn't really fair since Danny was at the team before Max and was Red Bull's former golden boy, but why was he their former? Well, Danny joined in 2011 with HRT, and they were a team with the car. Nothing more I could say, really. This is at a time where people with enough money were starting F1 teams and not really going further than that. But hey, it's still a seat, and Danny got one. In 2011, he performed really well, which got Red Bull to sign him for Toro Rosso in 2012 and 2013, and he performed even better. With many points finishes and Mark Webber retiring in 2013, Red Bull will promote Danny in 2014, next to reigning 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. This was a tough ask for Danny, but he not only stood his ground, he took over Seb's place. Danny was the leading driver that year while Seb struggled, which eventually led to Seb joining Ferrari for 2015. So, not a bad first year for Danny, and while he did struggle in 2015, that was because of car issues, not driver issues. Anyways, 2016 would be big since the Demon Child would join the team. Max Verstappen at 18 years of age joined the team and won on debut, which is great and all, but Danny knew he had to up his game if he wants to be dominant in the team still. So he did, with a couple more victories in 2016 and 2017. However, Max was only getting better, so come 2018, and this would be critical. Max has a long-ass contract and made 10 mil per year, while Danny had a contract ending in 2 years and made 6 mil per year. I mean, it was clear as day that Danny wasn't going to be replaced soon, but he had already been replaced despite good results, and all the eggs that Danny once had in his basket have now all gone to Max. Danny didn't like this, obviously, and what made this worse was Danny having a rough season. Every 3 races, this guy either had a car issue or a DNF, and this was rough, man. So with Max having the superior pay and contract, the team staff around him, and the rough season while Max rarely had any issues, he made the boss call and left the team after 5 years. Of course, Danny would do fine at Red Bull before suffering at McLaren and VCarb later on, but this move that he did in 2018 would set off a domino effect for the years to come for Red Bull. The first victim started by Danny Rick's departure from Red Bull would be Pierre Gasly. Gasly was F2 champion in 2016 before doing a couple of races in 2017 for Toro Rosso, and then getting a full contract in 2018 with the same team, and he did well. He got P4 in Bahrain for starters, as well as a couple other points finishes, and yeah, he was just good. Then he got promoted to Red Bull for 2019. I don't know about you, but Red Bull promoting him after just 1 year seems a bit sudden, especially for his development, but if Gasly fails, I'm sure they'll learn their lesson, right? Anyways, for 2019, he did quite shit. He was just flat out slow and impressed very little for Red Bull. I mean, he did show some promise like in Silverstone with the P4 finish, but he was just flat out slow, no way around it. However, the bright side was that he wasn't bending the car, mostly. If Red Bull just talk to him and try and help him so he could be more comfortable in the car, maybe Gasly can unlock his pace we know he has and be a solid driver for Red Bull. But this is Red Bull we're talking about, so of course he was dropped after Hungary, despite Horner saying they wouldn't, and replaced with Albon. Gasly would go back to Toro Rosso for the rest of 2019, and of course he got a podium. Then in 2020, of course he wins his first race, and in 2021 and 2022, he had many solid performances that always saw him in the top 10 best drivers that season. Then from 2023 to now, he has left Red Bull entirely and gone to Alpine, where he seems to be doing great. So at least Gasly wasn't all ass as a driver. Now with Gasly gone, someone needs to replace him, and that driver would be Alex Albon, a driver which at this point in time had 12 races under his belt. They really just go lower and lower, don't they? Anyways, Albon would at first perform much better. On debut, he fought from the back of the grid to P5 and would always finish like 6th, 5th, or 4th for the remainder of the races, which was much better than what Gasly did. It seemed that this driver gamble paid off for Red Bull, and now they have their second driver for Max, but oh no, 2020 was quite possibly, at least for now, the worst a Red Bull driver has performed compared to Max. Albon hardly qualified in the top 10, and the points finishes he did have were rarely ever above 5th. It's made even worse when you realize that Ferrari were utter ass that year and were never in points contention for most weekends, which should have meant higher results than in 2019. Plus, Albon bent the car a whole lot, and again, instead of trying to get Alex back to his 2019 form and see and identify the issues causing this fall off, they drop him and leave the problem unresolved for another driver to suffer in. Albon wouldn't get a drive for 2021. However, he would return to Williams in 2022 and has been thriving ever since. He loves his car and is now a solid driver that has earned his place on the grid and only continues to go further in the sport. So with yet another driver gone, Red Bull needed another, and this time, it seems they learned their lesson. They didn't go for young talent, instead for older, more experienced talent, since maybe the issue is the fact that these guys are young and don't know how to drive good yet, I guess. So they went for Checo Perez. Sergio Perez from 2011 to 2020 was a solid driver, except for 2013, but we don't really talk about that. In 2012, Checo was a real demon with a couple of podiums on genuine merit in a Sauber. And from 2014 to 2020, Checo would be at Force India, which later turned into Racing Point, and he was a fantastic driver and the pride of the team until the Strollonic plague. Lawrence Stroll in 2018 bought Force India after their financial troubles, and the cost of this was putting his son in that car. This got rid of Ocon in 2018, and Checo seemed safe for now until Vettel was hired for 2021. Okay, surely Stroll goes out since he hasn't done shit, and not Checo, who has given this team podiums for years, right? Nope. So with Checo without a seat, Red Bull swooped in and gave Checo a car that could win races. So how did he do? Well, in 2021, he for sure wasn't a Gasly or an Albon, but he wasn't exactly cooking. He did win in Baku after a brilliant performance, which was also helped by Max's car deciding it wanted to die, and did get a few more podiums, but for the most part, he was there or thereabout. He either did shit or did good, so he was kept for 2022, and 2022 would be his best season without a doubt. He won a few races, including Monaco, and helped lead Red Bull to a constructor's title. So, you know, despite Checo having troubles with the car's handling like past drivers here and there, maybe Red Bull were right. Maybe it was experience that was holding them back, and all they needed was an experienced and trusted driver next to Max. But then came 2023. 2023 initially started out looking like a title fight between Max and Checo. In the first 4 rounds, they traded wins and looked close to each other, but then came Miami. Miami would see Checo line up on pole and Max in 9th after some troubles, and if Checo could win, he would lead the standings and look solid for the season. However, Max was an absolute demon this race and charged through on a track where you cannot overtake, and eventually he was behind Checo, who had been leading for a while, and when Max got directly behind him, there wasn't even a fight. Max ran through him like nothing. Checo needed to bounce back in Monaco if he wanted to keep up, but what instead happened was Max dominating the hell out of everyone and Checo crashing in the weekend. This would see his skill take an absolute nosedive and coincidentally see Checo start reporting issues with the car's drivability, but Red Bull didn't listen since Max was winning left, right, and center and thought Checo was just washed. So despite Checo almost compromising the team, Red Bull kept him on, hoping he would improve, but nope. 2024 started nicely with Checo getting podiums, but after Miami again, his skill nosedived further, which lines up with him saying the car was getting even more horrible to drive. Again, they didn't listen until Max, their golden boy who was winning titles, started saying the same. It was until then that Red Bull finally looked and investigated the issues with the car, dating back to at least Spain 2023, where Checo first said the car was getting bad to drive. Red Bull had no excuse. Their old experienced driver says the car is bad, and so does their golden boy. So instead of maybe keeping him on to see if they could use his experience to iron out the issues with the car, they still fired Checo for 2024 since not only is he extremely slow, but is also crashing. which I mean in this case seems reasonable since he did cause so much trouble for the team. So with Checo gone, they're going to need a driver that can not only be next to Max again, but a driver with experience to see if they could be of any use to iron out the car, say a person like Sainz. But no, they hired the guy with 11 races. Liam Lawson. I already talked about Liam in this video, but to sum it up, this guy was set up. He had little testing in the car, has very little experience in the sport, and has a team that's dropped drivers like flies. So of course he's finishing lower than 15th and is hands down the worst a Red Bull driver has performed compared to Max. Again, for now, it seems inevitable Liam will be dropped, and if Yuki really is going to be the replacement, all I'm saying is, don't be surprised if the Yuki we see now finishing P8 starts looking like a worse driver when he gets to Red Bull. So after looking at everyone, let's see why this is constantly happening and why they are failing. I mean, it's obvious, right? Red Bull are essentially like Mercedes were from 2017 to 2021 in the sense that they are a one-man team now. The dynamic is clear. Max is the number one and brings home the points and titles, while whoever's in the second car covers off Max and picks up the points should Max fail, in theory. I say in theory since, well, did you skip the video up to this point? Mercedes pulled this dynamic off perfectly before with Lewis and Valtteri, so why haven't Red Bull? Well, it's like I said, it's a one-man team, but it's in all the wrong ways. That Red Bull car is so unbelievably optimized for Max to the point where not a single other driver on the grid could drive it, which leads to the poor soul that inevitably suffers in that second seat to have all their confidence washed away and continue to spiral down further and further until you're kicked out and left nowhere to go, just like with these guys. Unless you go to the cloning facilities on Camino and clone Max perfectly, Red Bull will always have this struggle. By creating an empire of domination, they have simultaneously dug themselves a hole below their feet, and all of these second drivers they keep employing is like if you fill the hole with leaves. It looks like a solution until you inevitably fall through anyways. However, I believe I have a solution to this problem. Simply stop replacing your drivers all the time and getting the reputation of an undrivable car and simply build a better car. Again, going back to Merc from 2017 and 2021, Bottas rarely had issues with this car, and what came of that was Lewis becoming a 7-time world champion and Bottas being there to secure the team's title. Of course, Valtteri wasn't perfect. He had his issues, especially when it came to defense, but he did enough thanks to the car given to him that he was able to drive. If Gasly, Albon, Checo, Ricciardo, and maybe even Liam were given cars that they could drive comfortably without compromising themselves too much, Red Bull would have been champions in 2021 and 2024 and certainly look much nicer than they do right now. They simply need to lock the hell in and choose a driver they think can help Max and make a car that fills both of their drivers' needs instead of only one of them. Of course, this then brings up the issue with Max. What if Max starts slumping because the car isn't built around him anymore? Well, Max is a 4-time world champion, one of the best in the sport's history. If he can't compromise just a little bit, then perhaps he's not the driver we all think he is. As long as the car doesn't act all understeery and boaty like the Merc cars from 2022 to 2024, then Red Bull needs to make this change so both of their drivers can perform well and stop all this second driver bullshit that never goes well for anyone involved. But that's just my opinion. If you have a differing view, then make sure to let me know in the comments below. So that was the history of the Red Bull second driver curse. Red Bull needs to do something ASAP, since how many drivers do they need to ruin until the picture becomes clear of what they need to do? And if it is already clear to them, but they are unwilling to change, then Lord knows what they're going to do when Max leaves the team eventually. Anyways, I want to give a quick shout out to all members of the flock for their continued support, and make sure to join it if you want cool benefits as well as just helping me out. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe since it really helps me out, and make sure to let me know in the comments who your winners and losers are. And as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.